Welcome to the Runs Well podcast with me, Rick Pearson.
Me, Ben Hobson.
And me, Jen Bazan.
Today we're talking about the enhanced games, the games where drug taking is allowed.
Dun, dun, dun. I mean, they don't exist yet.
They don't exist yet. Now, should we give some context about this
Yes,
enhanced
please.
games? So it's essentially an attempt to recreate the Olympics where performance-enhancing drugs are sanctioned. So there's no tests, and the sort of presumption is that everyone's taken them. It's the kind of brainchild of this guy, Aaron De Souza, who's an Australian-born, London-based businessman who seems to sort of position himself as a kind of defender of freedom. And the enhanced games, which you could call the dirty games as well, I think, but he's calling them the enhanced games.
Definitely.
Slated for December 2024. There's no location decided yet, and in all honesty, we're yet to know if they'll actually happen. But I think the idea of the enhanced games is worth discussing. Jen, you've been doing a bit of research into Aaron and his case for the enhanced games. So could you give us a sense of why he thinks this is like a good idea?
Yeah, so I was listening to him talking on a morning radio show in New Zealand. And his argument is that the games will actually be safer than the Olympic Games because, you know, his theory is that everyone's doping anyway now, but they're not doing it in a very safe way. They're going to places like Mexico and Thailand and going to these like dodgy pharmacies, injecting themselves. They don't understand what they're taking. It could be really dangerous. But with these games, athletes will be consulting with like proper doctors and proper scientists. And his argument is that until now, doping has been like pushed underground, and that's what's made it dangerous. But yeah, now it's going to have doctors and scientists and it'll all be very safe. But that's something we can talk about.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and it's worth talking about the sports it's covering, isn't it? Because it's track and field.
Yeah, so we've got, that's where we come in.
Yeah, we're track and field.
We're track and field, but then the other stuff is
like gymnastics, weightlifting,
fighting.
Yeah, combat sports,
Whoa.
and swimming. Yeah, combat sport. I mean, it's a different podcast somewhere, isn't it? But that to me feels like the most irresponsible end of this is that we can have people taking all manner of drugs and going into like a boxing ring or an MMA ring or something.
Yeah, there's no limit on it either. You can take as many drugs as you want.
Do you think that I'm just thinking of just playing devil's advocate, because we're probably all united in thinking the enhanced games is a horrendous idea, but just to entertain it for a little bit.
No, come on, let's entertain it.
Quite a few athletics records are heavily suspected to be doped. And there are a few. I think the women's 400 metre record is one that a lot of people talk about. And as a result, people don't get within about a second of it. So if you're a 400 metre athlete growing up, a young athlete, you can win an Olympic medal, but you're probably never going to break the world record. And I wonder what that, and it's not the only record in track and field that's like that. Does that have a demotivating effect? Has the Olympics in some way brought an idea as shocking as the enhanced game on itself a little bit by not actually properly dealing with drug cheats?
Yeah, that's interesting. With the 400 metre record, Marita?
Yeah, no, Marita Koch.
Marita Koch, she has never admitted to anything and she never tested positive, so there's no grounds for WADA to make a change. And even retrospective of the 10-year policy, they can't do anything unless an athlete says something. So that record will remain because there's no data to verify whether or not that was the case. So there is also there's a position where the evolution of the sport has kind of created this current situation where you've got records which can't be touched because of policy and because of lack of data. And now the current situation is so much better that people are essentially, hopefully, racing clean, so it's kind of like never going to be found out. So do you start again?
Well, look, this was talked about. I don't remember this, Jen. I think we were maybe working together at the time, but it was another policy that came out. And it was just a suggestion. It hadn't got to the point of the enhanced games with its own website and stuff, but someone said, how about we just get rid of all records? And it's for this reason. It's like there are records that exist that most people think are dope records. People can't get near them. Why don't we start again? Yeah. And, you know, it had lots of practical problems, i.e. like you don't know if everyone's going to be clean as of today. Yeah. Where do you go back to? You know, like if the world record goes, okay, so what? So like someone running in a school is going to set the world record or whatever. It's just kind of like it didn't really work. But it's interesting to think there's been this kind of appetite for drastic solutions within track and field for a while. And it maybe suggests it's because there's something wrong with how track and field is currently working.
Yeah, I think athletes' ability to like circumnavigate the drug testing
Yes.
system is like the problem. Because I was reading before, I think it's like only 2% of athletes that get tested get found out, but actually around 15% are doping. Yeah. So it's actually like, I mean, you've got like, you know, really iconic cases like Lance Armstrong, who was just like very, very clever at circumnavigating the drug testing system, and was tested on like so many occasions and was never found to have drugs in his system. Yeah, it's interesting. There needs to be a better way to do, like, I mean, people are just, I mean, I guess one of the main things, one of the main reasons people can get out of getting found for doping is by avoiding getting a test right, because like people come round to test athletes and then they're just you can be out. And I was reading before, like, as long as you have said you're going to be in a city and you are in that city but you didn't answer the door, that's okay. It's like, I don't know, I just feel like it needs to be
but then
tighter.
There's but you can only do that a number of times, and that's when most doping legislation kicks in, so people will have missed set number of tests, and if they do that concurrently, then they're by default, that's like a
You're sort of assumed guilty.
Assumed guilty, which I would agree with. You're a professional athlete. You know the rigors. You know that there's going to be testing. Of course, now and again there might be things that get in the way, but part of your job is to be in a certain place at a certain time so you can be tested.
Yeah.
And if you miss it, then
there
are consequences.
Yeah, another one of his arguments is that, the Olympics make, I think he said £8 billion in revenue every year, but none of that money goes to the athletes. It just goes to like the big bosses at the IOC who are like flying around in private jets or whatever. I don't know if that's true, but that's what he was saying on this radio show. And with this, athletes will get paid to participate, which they don't currently in the Olympics. And then also I think eventually you get like shares in it. So you'll get the profits.
Right. The other thing I was thinking is this part of a wider trend of kind of more extreme sport? I'm thinking there's been a rise in extreme sporting competitions, like the UFC is obviously an example, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. There's now bare knuckle fighting competitions in the US, and someone actually died following a bout in 2021, which is sort of a kind of worrying trend in sport where we're looking for like more extreme stuff. The enhanced game kind of feels like it's part of that movement for kind of almost like freak show.
But that's athletics.
To a point, But
that is the Olympics, isn't it? Like, I think that. But that's. I mean, obviously, I completely agree. But if you take into context what people are doing at these things, like you've weaned out the best
sort of genetic outliers.
Yeah, exactly. You've weaned out the best of the best, and they're all put against each other in competition for entertainment and for prize value and all this sort of stuff. So I don't think it's that far off being like.
I know what you mean. There's a freakishness to elite
and you're
sport.
there for the spectacle. Like you want to see that 100-meter final and be like, oh my god.
I think that's his argument as well. He said, who's going to want to watch the boring, slow Olympics when you could watch the fast, enhanced games where records are going to get obliterated?
This is my problem with it. I think some of his rhetoric around drug cheats is a little bit rich, I think. And it says,
I mean, he's heralding these people as absolute champions.
Yeah, he said, each Olympiad, another cohort of brave athletes sets new world records only to have their medals revoked, their careers suspended, and their names dragged through the mud. And then he told City AM, I'm a proud gay man, I'm an immigrant, and I'm a person of colour. When talking to enhanced athletes, the journey is so analogous with the LGBT community. The way I analogize it is like being an enhanced athlete today is like being a gay man 50 years ago. It's stigmatized, it's illegal, and in some senses it's done in a dark alley. Which, I think it's an interesting take on what it is to be a drug cheat.
Yeah.
But I think to sort of laud people who've broken rules knowingly as some kind of great pioneers, and to put them next to the kind of to gay people 50 years ago is a little rich, I think, and is kind of that's one of my problems with it, is it's kind of positioning people who we should actually be critical of as kind of
there's
wronged pioneers.
I guess you're sort of getting into the sense of like the modern era of a sports personality being a role model, right? That comes into it as well. There's kind of like celebrity and sport and people being have to sort of be squeaky clean, or like have to not be seen as bad, or I don't know.
I think that's the whole reason people like love athletics and sport, because they're like, these people have worked so hard, they've shown so much discipline, they've gritted it out, all those hours of training session. We admire them for that. That's why it's inspiring. So I think watching these games,
what joy could you take from it?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a level of you can't just take drugs and then you're like amazing at sport,
Sure.
but like you'd be like, well, it's not legit. Like
It's not legit.
it's not as inspirational, is it?
But that brings up a more important point. The caliber of people that they're going to get at the enhanced games. Are you going to get athletes or former athletes or current athletes, or what? How are you going to get? So he's talking about you don't want to watch the boring old slow Olympics. But if you're getting retired old sprinters doing 13 seconds for the 100 meters, but they're like juiced up beyond measure, like that's not that interesting.
Exactly. Like it's one of the many problems of it, isn't it? It's like who's going to turn up?
If Inga Brixen goes along and does it, sure,
Yeah,
that's interesting. But
no,
Nike's not going to want to do that.
No credible athletes are going to be there. No credible sporting brand would sponsor it.
Well, credible or not, just a brand would not.
Yeah, and I mean, he's talked about having some backing in Silicon Valley because they see him as a disruptor. That's his own take on it. And maybe that isn't true, but you think, the traditional sponsors of Olympics are not going to want to touch it. No athlete's going to want to touch it. He's got a few Olympians on the kind of board, but it's a little bit of a rogues gallery of drug cheats, basically.
Yeah. Also, no one's going to want to broadcast it, are they?
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's so cynical, isn't it? It's like it basically just gives up. It's like, look, we've lost the battle with drug cheats. So basically, this is an example. We're going to go all in.
Yeah. I will make the case that agreeing with Aaron, that they're all adults.
That's what he would say. Yeah,
yes,
free choice.
Free choice. He sort of said these are all adults. They can make decisions, and they can, if they want to do it, they can do it. And that in terms of a statement of reality and sort of choices being made in life, you can't fault that. Like I actively think that it's offering up an alternative path for competition for people. This might not be the right one, but it does raise a question of being like, is the IOC, is the whole Olympic thing, is it too it's like whenever you see like a football league that suddenly pops up as a new, like an attempt to do something different, or like golf recently, we're going to do this different. Yeah, it is important that there are people who appear and go, the way it's currently done isn't perhaps the best way, just because it's still going on and it's got the history behind it. Is it still the best way to do it? Yeah. So I would say that from that point of view, I kind of like it as a disruptor.
Yeah, it's just as disrupting things go. It's so,
but it's not
cynical and irresponsible.
I think that's the thing. It's not to be a disruptor, but kind of like choosing the wrong way of doing it.
Yes, I think that's right. Like something needs to happen to shake up track and field. I think put more bums on seats, make it more exciting, maybe trim down certain events.
That's what they did, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Diamond League got rid of the 10K and stuff. And then
exactly. And I think that's more.
That was a really interesting race, so I don't know why they did it. But anyway,
but that's more kind of sensible thinking for me. Is like, how can we make this more exciting, while keeping some semblance of like, I don't know, like some decency in sport, rather than be like away with the rules.
This is the Runner's World podcast.
I can't help but like be intrigued by it, though.
Would you watch it?
Yeah,
I think a lot of people would watch it.
I would. I wouldn't. But then I think that there's a lot of stuff on TV which I think is way worse. As in, like, if you're going to make it a spectacle, I don't ever watch Love Island. I don't watch any of these, like, those sorts of shows. I can't stand it. Like, it just drives me nuts that people are really engaged with, like, pointless activities like, you mate, you want to get off of me? That's sort of like, well, I'd much rather, like, if we're going to go along that sort of like, and I'm kind of including it in that world because it feels a bit like that sort of TV.
I think it just feels a bit like a weird social experiment where, like, it's just scary that we don't know what the side effects are there. I think that's the thing.
Well, that's where the great irresponsibility of it comes in. And there's also many sort of like associated deaths issues and health concerns and all of that sort of stuff from extensive. Even Lance, I think in the documentary talked about he took a lot of growth hormone, then he got his cancer diagnosis, and then he stopped taking that straight afterwards because there was like comparables of of like what if you've got a tumor and you're taking growth hormone, like everything's growing. So it's, I mean, I again, that was in the documentary, which was on Netflix, I think. I'd have to rewatch it to see the actual precise information on that. But there was certainly, like, even him as a doper was sort of different things had different effects, and there was never any great, like, there's a great science in terms of how these things affect your body from a performance perspective, EPO, and it's the way it changes your blood, and oxygen, carrying oxyhemoglobin and hemoglobin and and all this sort of stuff. Loads of information, but the knock-ons of like abusing these substances, that's not known. Really.
Yeah.
So
for sure. It's a bit of a Pandora's box, isn't it, to be opening and being like, everyone just go for it. It reminds me, like, this enhanced games argument reminds me a little bit of what the kind of gun lobby in the States roll out when there's a shooting. It's like, well, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. So the solution is not less guns. The solution is more guns. And this is kind of the same thing. The solution is not less drugs. It's everyone having drugs. And it's kind of like, no, that's
it's got to be a better way.
That's wrong thinking. The solution is stricter rules on drugs. When people are caught, they are banned for life. Maybe they don't get 1 or 2 chances with this. Actually send out a message that drug taking will not be tolerated at an individual and a national level. I think that's how to, kind of rebuild trust in athletics. It's not saying, go on then, we'll have an enhanced one over there and we'll have a natural one over there.
But you've still got, like, even like this week, you've got the Kenyan runner Titus Sekuru he won Milan in 2021 in 2 hours and 2 minutes 57 or something, like 10th fastest marathon time ever or something, And he's been caught recently. I can't remember the name of the drug. It's some sort of steroid, I think. And then he had a synthetic opioid after the Abu Dhabi marathon or something like that. And then there's also tampering with medical records so that, like, therapeutic use things.
Exemptions.
So it's kind of, exemptions. So there's but the ban for the substance is like 2 years, but the tampering is 10.
Right. Okay.
So there's sort of like, you'd imagine that really, if there's even that in itself, to me, is a bit like, hold on.
Yeah.
If there's a substance found in the blood tests, that should be it, right?
Yeah, I think it's a 2-year ban. You can still be in your prime as a runner. Yeah, even if it's 5, Ben. It's like, and also, like, what's been pointed out to me is that those benefits you get from drug taking, they stay around. So, like, it's not like, I did a year off or 2 years off. It's like all that benefit you got from training and racing with banned substances has kind of made you a better athlete than you ought to be.
Yeah.
And that's still the case, And
that's why you couldn't take part in the enhanced games and then go, okay, I'm now going to take part in the Olympics. So everyone would be like, we probably like...
it's a dead end, isn't it?
It's not going to work.
If they did it in the 2 years, so, obviously 4 years, if they did it like in the pit of the 2 years, you know what I mean? Like then you'd have 2 years build up to the enhanced games, get absolutely like benefit from all of that, then just train that normally up, build up for the Olympics. You'd have this weird cycle of like, and it's just I mean, even microdosing EPO, which is what most endurance athletes in cycling and running have been, that's done in blocks. Like it's not a constant, so it's out of game. That's why out of competition testing, and like they stop with a certain amount of time prior to the event. I don't know. My I think it's fascinating as a concept.
It's like a pub chat, isn't it? It's not a serious.
No,
it's not serious.
It's something you'd like argue in like a uni dissertation. An interesting thing to like theorize about, but like it shouldn't actually happen, right? It's just an interesting premise.
Yeah, it's like a sort of dystopian vision of the future, isn't it? But I do think it's worrying because I think it's a sort of thing that can gain traction. I really hope it doesn't happen, and I don't think it is going to happen because I think you'd have a problem in terms of actually attracting good athletes and good sponsors.
It's just going to come down to athletes taking part. I mean, especially like athletes that are at the peak of the career or actually good. It's career suicide, like you were saying. Like the people aren't going to want to take part in this and be associated with the stigma and shame of it. And you need athletes to make this competition work, right? So
you'd almost want it to happen and it to be terrible. Do you know what I mean? And it to be like, it just turned out like it was pretty rubbish runners running sub-world record times, and we found out nothing, and let's not do it again.
What do you think about the stuff he says in it all about the performance enhancing drugs actually being stigmatized around extending life quality for people as they get older. So he talks a lot about like the 50s and the 60-year-olds and the 70-year-olds breaking world records, and the fact that maybe old men in their 60s are taking testosterone already because it's their levels have fallen and they feel terrible, so they told to take testosterone to make themselves feel better, and in fact it's that can allow them to perform better as an athlete. And there's all this sort of like there's a lot of
there's some grey areas, aren't there?
There's some grey areas in there where he talks about like he's not talking about a 25-year-old 100-meter world record holder doing. He's talking about like 50s and 60-year-old masters and veterans and all these people who are like then going to break incredible records because they've taken loads of drugs.
For me, it's just
but he was chatting about how WADA and governing bodies are almost limiting the science around extending life.
Yeah.
And that's.
I don't know. Don't you think that like the Masters stuff is impressive because we're all aware of kind of diminishing returns,
horrible aging process?
Yeah, exactly. And it's impressive against that backdrop, isn't it? If you're like, there's a 60-year-old who's taken lots of performance-enhancing drugs, and it's kind of meaningless. It's a bit like,
I mean, his argument on that is that actually, no, it's really inspirational because you think you're done in, you can't, that's the end of your kind of sporting career, even if you're an amateur. But actually, you take some drugs and, there's still, potential for you. Yeah. But, I mean, I agree with you. It's that's why you admire people, isn't it? Because just the hard work that you put in. And
like if you see, like when you see those news stories pop up, like 102-year-old man runs 60 meters in 15 seconds, or whatever it was, and you see this guy absolutely just like shuffling. If it turns out that he was like, just massive doses every single day just to get to that stuff, it wouldn't have the gloss and the shine.
No, of course it wouldn't.
You'd just be like,
of course it wouldn't.
That's a strange story.
Exactly. I mean, we like to a much lesser degree that people have talked about, records being a bit meaningless after the advent of super shoes.
Right. Yeah.
And you could say in some ways that super shoes do give it an unfair advantage, and there's possibly a financial doping aspect there of like people. So, quite a lot of people can't afford a £200 pair of shoes, and most people who'd be up in arms about drug taking certainly not up in arms about having that advantage over people. And it is an unfair advantage, isn't it? In some ways, if most other people in the field can't do it, that is unfair. But I think it's the physical. It's also the physical dangers of this. I think that's probably at the heart of why I think this is one of the many reasons I think it's such a bad idea. Is I think it's like it's really unsafe. I still believe that the vast majority of athletes at the top level aren't doping. And I think that I'm in the majority there of that. I think people still enjoy things like the Olympics because we have some faith in the majority of the field being clean. That's kind of...
Yeah, and there is evidence to support that. So if you look at the advancements in shoe technology, in the advancements of tracks, in the foam in shoes, the training methods, all of these things that are pushing the sport forward and making people much, 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 much faster than they used to be, you've still got records that aren't being broken. When you go back to old tech, bad tracks, non-carbon plated shoes, and you've still got world records because they ran faster. And now I would say that is sort of some evidence that people are running clean. They have advantages, but they're still not as fast as those who were doping. I remember watching a TV show years ago when I was really young, and I think it was on Channel 4, and there was an experiment where there was one guy had a placebo, one guy just had caffeine, and one guy had steroids. Right. And they trained to do like 100 meters, and that was the whole that was the show. And they were asking everyone at the end, like, what do you think you've been having? And the guy on the steroids was like, well, I've clearly been having steroids.
Because I'm stuck.
Just because he had every single symptom that you'd get, like sore nipples, swelling, water retention,
Right, okay.
There's also, when you take steroids, it's not just you take steroids, there's a whole world of stuff you have to take with it.
Okay.
For it to be effective and for your body to, process it properly and to not have side effects and all this sort of stuff. So you have to stack all these I know a lot about it. And it sounds like
Ben's like,
Are you doping?
I'm in training. So you have to sort of take all these additional things with it. And he was just like, well, it's clearly me. Because the guy, and he absolutely smashed the other two. Like, in terms of, the guy on caffeine was like, I'm sort of a lot, I don't sleep much. He's going to, like.
He's just got the shakes
Yeah,
all the time.
And the guy who had nothing was just like, it's got worse. I'm too, but the 100-meter race was just like quite clear, and so I think probably that's planted a seed of interest in me, where it's just like, just even that like small little glimpse of just like what was achieved.
So there you go. That's the Enhanced Games, isn't it? Hopefully not coming to a screen near you or a venue near you next year, but we'll have to see about it.
I think he says it's going to happen in December 2024, and it could just start with just one race, like a 100-meter race. But let's be honest, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. What does everyone else think?
Yeah,
listening?
I'm sure we've got
Podcast
some
at
opinions.
runnersworld.co.uk. Let us know what you think, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. But would you do it?
What, take part?
Yeah.
No, come on. Well, let us know. Let us know your thoughts. Well, that brings us to the end of this very controversial episode of the Runners World podcast. Thanks very much to Jen Bazon for coming on.
No, thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next week, I guess.
Yeah, you can subscribe to 3 issues of Runners World at the moment. Just head to runnersworld.com/UK/podcast offer to get that exclusive listener offer. And you should also subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already, because that's the best thing you can do.